Welcome to Stealth Prepper. In the blink of an eye, life as we know it can change. This is a truth we've all come face to face with, especially when we think about the vulnerability of our utility services. Imagine for a moment your life without electricity. No light, no refrigeration, no internet, no electronic communication. Now extend that thought to water. No clean drinking water, no showers, no functioning toilets. And what about natural gas? No heating in the dead of winter or cooking your favorite meals. The reality is, so much of our daily life is intricately tied to these utility services that we often take for granted. But let's pause for a moment here and delve deeper into this concept of utility vulnerability. What does it actually entail? Well, it's the susceptibility of our utility services to sudden and prolonged failure, and if you think such failures are rare or unlikely, history tells us otherwise. Take, for example, the Great Blackout of 2003. 50 million people across the northeastern United States and parts of Canada were plunged into darkness. Businesses shuttered, transportation systems halted, and people were left scrambling to cope. Fast forward to the year 2021, the state of Texas faced a similar predicament. A severe snowstorm led to a catastrophic breakdown of the state's electrical grid, leaving millions without power and freezing temperatures. These are not just isolated incidents, they're stark reminders of the reality we live in. A reality where our utility systems, despite their importance, are vulnerable. They can fail, and when they do, the effects can be far-reaching and devastating. So, why are we discussing this? Well, understanding the reality of utility vulnerability is the first step towards preparing for it. It's about acknowledging that these systems, which form the backbone of our modern lives, are not infallible. As we can see, these are not isolated incidents. They're a clear signal that our utility systems can and do fail. One of the major culprits behind these catastrophic failures is the aging and fragile U.S. electrical grid. The U.S. electrical grid, an intricate network of power plants, substations, and transmission lines, is a feat of engineering that has been powering America for over 100 years. However, this grid is showing its age. Designed and built in an era before the rise of renewable energy and the threat of climate change, the grid is struggling to keep up with the demands of the 21st century. To understand the extent of the problem, let's delve into the design of our electrical grid. Picture a tree with its many branches spreading out in all directions. That's the structure of our grid, a centralized system where power flows from the plants, the tree trunk, to the consumers, the leaves. This design, while efficient, is vulnerable. Any disruption in one branch can cause a ripple effect, leading to widespread outages. Now, let's add climate change into the mix. The grid was designed with a certain set of weather assumptions in mind. However, as we've seen with recent extreme weather events, these assumptions no longer hold true. Heat waves, hurricanes, wildfires, and even deep freezes are becoming more common, and our grid is ill-prepared to handle these shifts in weather patterns. In the past, we've seen the devastating effects of this fragile system. Remember the Great Northeast Blackout of 2003, 50 million people without power? Or the Texas grid failure in 2021, a deadly winter storm that left millions in the cold. These are not isolated incidents but symptoms of a larger, systemic issue. The reality is, our electrical grid is not just aging, it's outdated. It's a system that's struggling to keep up with our growing energy needs and the erratic weather patterns brought on by climate change. As we move forward, we need to rethink how we generate and distribute electricity, focusing on resilience and adaptability. As weather patterns continue to change, the risk of grid failure only grows. But what happens when these utility services we rely on fail? What does that mean for our daily lives? Well, let's dive into that and unravel the impact of utility failures. Imagine a day without electricity. The lights go out, and suddenly, the whole world seems to stop. The comfort of your air conditioning or heating disappears. Your refrigerator stops working and you're at risk of losing all your perishable food. The devices that keep you connected to the world, your phone, your computer, your television, they're all rendered useless. Now, consider a water outage. You turn on the tap, but nothing comes out. You can't cook, you can't clean, and you can't even flush your toilet. Access to clean water is a fundamental need for survival, and without it, the risks of dehydration and disease increase exponentially. A natural gas failure can also have dire consequences, especially in the colder months. Many homes rely on natural gas for heating, and without it, the risk of hypothermia becomes a real threat. Finally, let's not forget about waste management. Imagine a week without garbage collection. The accumulation of trash can lead to a host of problems, from unpleasant odors to the spread of disease. These scenarios may sound extreme, but they have happened before. From the blackout in 2003 that affected 50 million people, to the Texas electrical grid breakdown in 2021 during a snowstorm, utility failures are a harsh reality that can strike at any moment. Each of these failures highlights our dependency on utility services. We rely on them to cook our food, to keep us warm, to communicate with each other, and to maintain hygiene and sanitation. When they fail, it disrupts every aspect of our daily lives. So, the next time you flip a switch, turn on a tap, or take out the trash, remember how vital these services are. And think about what you would do if they were suddenly gone. The impact of such failures is extensive, disrupting every aspect of our daily lives. So, what can we do? The answer lies in individual preparedness. The key to overcoming the challenges of utility failure is preparation. It's not about living in fear of what might happen, but rather taking control of our own safety and well-being in the event of an emergency. Firstly, let's talk about water. It's recommended that each person have a minimum of 1 gallon of water per day for at least 3 days. That's 3 gallons per person minimum. This would cover drinking and sanitation needs. Next up, food. Consider stocking up on non-perishable items that don't require refrigeration, cooking, water, or special preparation. Items like canned goods, dried fruits, nuts, and high-energy bars are good examples. But remember, it's not just about having enough to eat and drink. It's also about having essential supplies on hand. This could include things like a flashlight, batteries, a manual can opener, a first aid kit, a multi-tool, and sanitation items like toilet paper and hand sanitizer. Let's not forget about our ability to turn off utilities when needed. In the case of a disaster, you may need to shut off your natural gas lines to prevent leaks. Knowing how to do this ahead of time can save you from potential danger. Finally, managing waste is another critical aspect of preparedness. In the event of a prolonged outage, you may need to find safe and sanitary ways to dispose of waste. This could involve using plastic bags for human waste or setting up a temporary outdoor latrine if it's safe to do so. In the end, preparedness is about empowering ourselves. It's about knowing that if utilities fail, if the lights go out, we have the tools and the knowledge to take care of ourselves and our loved ones. Remember, it's not just about having the right supplies, but also knowing how to use them effectively. It's about planning, practicing, and being ready to adapt when the unexpected happens. Being prepared can mean the difference between survival and disaster. In the face of these realities, we have a choice. We can ignore the risks, or we can prepare. And that's the key takeaway here. We've journeyed through the stark reality of our utility vulnerability, from the aging and fragile U.S. electrical grid to the massive impact that utility failures can have on our daily lives. We've seen how a sudden disaster can leave 50 million people in the dark, how a snowstorm can cripple an entire state's power supply. We've also talked about the importance of individual preparedness, of having a plan and the necessary supplies to weather through such crises. Remember, it's not just about electricity, it's about water, natural gas, waste management. It's about the fundamental services that keep our lives running smoothly, services that we often take for granted until they're gone. These are complex systems, vulnerable to disruptions and failures, and when they do fail, the effects can be far-reaching and devastating. But it doesn't have to be a catastrophe. We can take steps to mitigate these risks, to be prepared for when disaster strikes. It's not about living in fear, but about being aware and ready. It's about having a supply of water and food, about knowing how to shut off your natural gas line, about having a plan for managing waste during an extended outage. It's about understanding the vulnerabilities of our utility services and taking responsibility for our own safety and well-being. So, as we wrap up this discussion, I encourage you to take a moment to consider your own preparedness. Do you have a plan in place? Are you ready to face a utility failure? These are important questions that we all need to ask ourselves. And I hope that this video has given you some food for thought. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you found it informative, please like, subscribe, and share your own preparedness tips in the comments.